our second MBC, I can't call it a Sunday series anymore because here we are debuting on our Wednesday night. Now we'll have to come up with a better alliteration for that.
Wednesday webinars or something.
Something, yes. So welcome everyone. I always like to review a little bit about why we started this series, because I want to honor our friend Allison Tischler, who it was her idea to start these webinars on the things that are important to those of us living with MBC that nobody else is talking about. And we lost her in, was it 2020? The years get by me now. So I always want to make sure that we're saying the names of those people that we've lost that have made an impact. And Allison certainly made an impact on my life. So welcome to everyone. Tonight, I am so excited to be introducing some new members of our MBC Leadership Committee, as well as some familiar faces. And so those of you who don't know, the MBC Leadership Committee is a group of people living with metastatic breast cancer who get together and advise survivingbreastcancer.org on how to ensure that the needs of the MBC community are being met. And we also are responsible for this webinar series. And then in 2022, we began our workshop series, which we are going to be reprising this year. And I'm very excited about these offerings for specific to the metastatic community, but then able to use some of the things we've learned to help everybody. So tonight is just a time to get to know each of the people on the committee, the new people on the committee, and just to talk about what they're each going to be spearheading this year, and just looking forward to an amazing 2023. So Laura, did you want to say anything else about the SBC or the MBC stuff?
No, thank you. I'm so excited. I'm excited to test out, our Wednesday webinars or see how they go. So I appreciate that. We're always innovating and trying to figure out what we can do better at survivingbreastcancer.org. And, we need community in order to hear the needs of the community and go out and create. So I'm just super grateful for everyone who is here tonight. And then I know we have a couple people on the leadership team who are unable to make it tonight. But again, it takes a village. And I'm just so excited to be working with everyone and diving into 2023.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. So yes, thank you for the reminder. We are missing two of our members. Stacy is she in Idaho? I know she's in an I state.
Yeah.
She's been really struggling with her treatment, and so definitely send her some good thoughts and vibes. She's been having to get blood transfusions pretty regularly. And then Kathleen Friel, who is in New York, I should say doctor, should not, cut her short there or sell her short there. But she is actually in a PET scan, getting a PET scan this evening. So she may actually not be in the tube right now, but definitely want to send her some good vibes. It's always a little scary. She was supposed to have her PET scan earlier, but the machine was down. And as all of us deal with this scanxiety stuff every few months, once you psych yourself up to go get that scan and then you're told to go home, that was not an enjoyable experience for her. So we're definitely thinking of Stacy and Kathleen tonight as we delve into some of the other things that we're going to be doing as a committee. So, Kristen, I would love to start with you because you gave us this lovely chart of all of the things that we're going to be focused on this year with the newsletters and blog posts. And I would love for you to introduce yourself and also talk about, what you're going to be doing this year and focusing on for SBC.
I'm a writer by profession, and so that is what I mostly contribute to SBC. And what I did for this year was pick a topic for each quarter that I could write to in a series of blog posts. And they include things like wholeness as compared to wellness. Because I think, in the SBC community, we might not feel well all the time, but I think we can feel whole, if that makes sense. And I like that topic a lot. I can't even remember the other topics. This is what happens when I get put on the spot.
You brought up this idea of surviving survivorship and how,
yeah.
And for a lot of us in the MBC community, the word survivor is just not something that resonates so much. But this idea of surviving, is
surviving survival.
Yeah.
Yes.
So would you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely, because once you get diagnosed, there's such a flurry of activity at the beginning, and then it becomes sort of routine. Either you finish treatment or you continue. If you're in MBC, you continue with treatment sort of endlessly. And the idea that we have to somehow rise to living as fully as we can, despite having what's called a terminal illness, I think is tricky sometimes. So I wanted to offer some ideas around that. And what I want to do now that I've planned out what to write over the course of the year is interview people for the stories. The stuff that I've done before is pretty much from my own experience as a MBC survivor and as a coach. So coaching is the other thing that I do besides writing. How does that sound?
No, that's great. And so I just want to make sure to make it clear to anybody who's listening, whether you're listening live or later, that if you have something that you want to share, and maybe writing is not your thing, then Kristen would be somebody who could interview you and put that together just because of her writing background. And, if we could back up a little bit, Kristen, how long have you been living with MBC?
It'll be 5 years in May. And where mine has spread is my bones and my liver. I'm on, I don't know how many lines of treatment I've been on already, but I'm currently on something that's interesting because it was designed for women with triple negative breast cancer. And I'm not. It's called, boy, am I drawing blanks tonight.
Is it Trodelvy?
Trodelvy. I'm on Trodelvy. Just started. I've had my second treatment with it, and I got my fingers crossed.
Yes, definitely.
Right. But yeah, so I've been living with it almost 5 years.
And Trodelvy is one of the antibody drug conjugates that everybody is all excited about right now. Some of you may have heard of Enhertu, but it's these meds that are able to use different proteins to get inside a cell, cancer cell, and then drop a payload or chemotherapy inside the cell. And so the hope is that it's not as toxic or doesn't have as many of the side effects because it's more targeted, but certainly doesn't seem to be always the case for everybody. Trodelvy is actually one of the medications that Allison, she was able to get a compassionate use waiver to get on Trodelvy before it even came out. She was triple negative, and now they're looking at it in the ER positive setting, which is very exciting. So,
because I was ER positive, but eventually the hormone-based treatments stopped working for me. So
yes,
it was as if I were triple negative.
And that's one thing I think that has been a big surprise for me in this whole MBC experience is that you're given your subtype and you think, oh, that's set in stone. I'm always going to be hormone positive. I'm always going to be HER2 negative or positive or whatever. But it's really more of a gradient, right? Your grades or your flavors of a particular biomarker like a HER2 or estrogen. And then it can change over time. We can lose or gain those receptors, or I individually lost the progesterone receptor as the cancer mutated, which is an indication of endocrine resistance, meaning resistant to a lot of those medications that are prescribed for those of us who are hormone positive. So always learning, always understanding more about these new meds and as they understand more. So we're very thankful to have you, Kristen, with us. And our second workshop of the year, which will be in the second quarter, will be centered around this idea of surviving survivorship or surviving with MBC. I'm not sure what we're going to label it yet, but just the lived experience of living with not dying from, as we had on our ribbon at San Antonio. So would you like to share anything else, Kristen?
I think the only thing I'd like to say for anybody else who might be trying Trodelvy is that my previous treatment was Abraxane, and I am feeling fewer side effects so far.
That's good.
So
that's really good.
So
and
thumbs up.
Abraxane is in the same class as Taxol and Taxotere. They are collectively called the taxanes. So yes, so that's a good way of comparing the medications then in terms of the side effect load.
And the last thing I'd like to say is thank you to Dawn, because she is the person who I interviewed for my current story for MBC. Thanks, Dawn.
Oh, I can't wait for that to come out. Awesome.
So be looking for that in one of the newsletters that come out on Mondays. So since we're talking to Dawn, let's move over to Dawn. Dawn just had lymphedema surgery, so I see that you've still got your I don't know, is that a glove on?
No, it's just a wrap.
Oh, okay. So Dawn, if you'd like to introduce yourself and talk about what you've been doing for SBC and will be doing for 23.
Yes, I'm Dawn from Texas. I've been living with metastatic breast cancer since 2018. So April will be 5 years for me too. And currently on the new chemo called Enhertu, which is working for me. So I've been blessed. I've been with SBC for 2 years now, and doing the MBC for since we started November 2021. And I make beanies for our group, and I'm going to be talking about lymphedema in March.
Yes, so very, very important, since so many people end up with lymphedema after those taxanes or after the lymph node surgery, right? What they call that dissection, lymph node dissection?
Yeah, removal. Yeah.
Yes. So Dawn, you've been involved with the Thursday Night Thrivers group and now help to moderate the breakout session. So would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the breakout sessions are the first and third Thursday of every month. And we started with once a month, but we realized we needed more. So we work twice a month now. And it's just peer-to-peer run. And we just no agenda. We just talk, go around the room and see how everybody's doing.
So if you have thought about joining the Thursday Night Thrivers group and thought, oh, I don't know if I want to be in a mixed group, meaning mixed in terms of stages, we do have on the first and third Thursdays a separate breakout room for people living with MBC. I know Kathleen comes pretty regularly to that as well, and participates in that. Yes, so definitely consider that. And then I got one of the beanies that Dawn made. So if you haven't gotten one of the care packages from SBC, let Laura know, because those beanies are really comfortable.
And all of those programs are absolutely free too, right? So it's kind of come as you are, available to anybody. And, I think some nights we're there like super energized and excited. Other nights we're lying horizontal on the couch and still just using Zoom and connecting with people. And one of the things that organically developed also was our WhatsApp group for early stage as well as late stage. So there is a WhatsApp group for those living with metastatic breast cancer, again, all peer-to-peer, but it's a way to stay connected from Thursday to Thursday. Because a lot happens in those 24 hours.
So true. Laura, will you talk a little bit about the app too? Because that is another way of getting connected to other people within survivingbreastcancer.org. And I don't know if a lot of people know about it.
That's a really good point. I need to do better branding and marketing around that. But yes, I am not a coder or developer by any means, but we did somehow manage to create a survivingbreastcancer.org app, which is available in all the app stores, whether you have an Android or iPhone. And actually, if you can download it and see our blogs and our content, and we have on demand. What do we have on demand? The meditation series that we also run on Mondays. And so that's one way, like you can just totally access the exterior outer face of information. However, if you're looking for a more deeper experience, you can sign up. And it's kind of like social media for those with breast cancer. So there's private groups. You can join a group. You can stay connected with people. There's, DMs and messaging and profiles you can create. So I like to think of it as, social media for our community.
Just another way to connect with other like-minded people, and also totally free. You can download that off of the Apple Store or wherever. Android, I don't know what it's called for Android users. Is it a store too?
Like Google Play, I guess. Yeah, I know. I'm so confused too.
Yeah.
I've been using Apple for a little bit too long here. So, all right. So I on purpose left our new members for last because I want them to fully introduce themselves, because we are so excited to be really honored to have Katie and Amy join us this year on the MBC Leadership Committee. So Katie, if you would like to introduce yourself and maybe why you decided to say yes when we asked you if you might want to serve on the committee.
Sure. So hi, I'm Katie and I live in Lincoln, Nebraska. I was diagnosed with MBC de novo in February of 2018. So about a month away from 5 years. Triple positive, initially had mets pretty significantly in my liver and my bones. And I've done treatments, experienced a little bit of progression, and I am just getting ready to start my full second line of therapy, which is going to be Herceptin, Faslodex, and Verzenio. So it's a little bit non-traditional second line option. And my progression, I guess, was in my lungs. So we did some radiation to one of the tumors, and then there was still some additional progression. So that was when we decided to change the treatments. Additionally, I've participated in a clinical trial. So my first line of treatment, I was actually in a trial, but in the standard of care arm. So I didn't get the experimental drug in that trial. I work full-time in higher education. When Laura asked me if I was interested, working with Laura kind of and William on another project, I said, absolutely sure, why not? I'm just excited to be able to be a part of the team, to be able to contribute, and to help out in any way that I can.
Would you like to talk about that other project that you're doing? Or is that top secret?
Not yet.
Okay, all right. Well,
we're holding our breath, so once we have the news, we can share.
To be determined. So it's really important for us at SBC to make sure that we have diversity on our leadership teams. And obviously we're not doing such a great job of racial diversity at this point, but having people with different subtypes, being on different drugs, having different experiences is very important as we evaluate the content and make sure that we're offering as a wide variety of information and education as possible for everybody. So someone who is triple positive tends to be on more medications than sometimes than people with other subtypes, just because you have to cover both the estrogen piece, the hormonal piece, as well as the HER2 piece. So that ties you to every 3-week infusions, right, Katie? That's what Herceptin and Perjeta have.
Yeah.
Okay. So that can be lifestyle altering as well, because you're tied to that infusion center. So anyway, we're very excited to have you, Katie. Katie got to go to Ireland last year, so I'm very excited to see where she might go this year. Amy is the second addition to the MBC Leadership Committee. So Amy, would you like to introduce yourself and also tell us why you said yes?
So I am Amy. The accent is from Georgia, but I live in upstate New York. My background is healthcare, and I have worked with SBC to do Ask the Expert, a couple of series, and enjoyed the content of that and then other things that were put on. I've also enjoyed, which Laura forgot to mention, the book club. It's cool because you get to do the book club and it's not just focused on cancer. So it's a distraction and another way for us to connect. I am ER positive, and I am still on my first line of treatment since my MBC diagnosis, and I will be 4 years MBC diagnosis on Sunday. and 9 years from my original diagnosis, which was stage 3. So 5 years to the day I was diagnosed metastatic, and I'll celebrate my 4-year MBC on Sunday. For me, I said yes because I want to be able to make a difference for somebody else. I want to be able to create a community where people feel like they are engaged and involved and that they're supported, whether it be something simple with everyday struggles or within the community. My line of treatment is Ibrance and Faslodex. So I have had 49 cycles and feel very appreciative that I'm still on the first line of treatment. But as the months tick away, there is fear. So I share that often, that there's fear when this line doesn't work, that I'll rapidly progress through the other lines. I had extensive surgery and other things to hopefully prevent the metastatic diagnosis. That did not happen for me. And I'm somebody that had some failed surgeries. I share that when I feel like I need to with other people, but most often I don't share that part of the experience. And I feel like I want to show people that you can live with this disease. You don't have to die from it. I currently work full-time and part-time, trying to cut back on the part-time, and I do advocacy work in my spare time. So I look forward to what this year holds for SBC.
And Amy is going to probably be debuting some moderation in the Facebook group that SBC has. So if you are part of the community and you're not part of the closed Facebook group that survivingbreastcancer.org has, you should definitely join there. Lots of announcements in there about programming. The calendar is always shared in there in terms of upcoming events or webinars or and because SBC is doing all kinds of things. But Amy has done quite a bit of moderation for Living Beyond Breast Cancer in their various Facebook groups. And so she's going to be looking at that, as well as taping some educational videos for us, because she really understands this whole, why am I getting a PET scan? What's different between a PET scan and a bone scan and a CT scan and an MRI and, you know, all the other scans that you could be getting? Why would a doctor order those things? So stay tuned for those educational videos that will be coming out soon. So I wanted to go back through our group and talk about a couple of things. So number one, you've heard that a lot of us have been living with MBC for a certain number of years. And I wanted everybody to share that because when you're newly diagnosed, when you first get this disease, get the notification that you have this disease, or you've been living with it for a little while, it's hard to see a way forward. It's hard to see, you know, where am I going to be at 4 or 5 years down the road? These statistics, unfortunately, say only about 28% of us will get to 5 years, but we know that we're not statistics, right? We're all individual people. And so I wanted to go back through the people on the committee just to talk a little bit about what's different between kind of that initial crazy, overwhelming fog, oh my God, what the heck just happened, to, okay, now I really want to live with this disease. Now I want to help other people live with this disease. And I think it's important to see that perspective, right? Because when you're newly diagnosed, I mean, I'll just speak for myself. I could only see like 1 minute at a time for a while, and then it got a little bit longer as time went on. But even, 5.5 years into it, we're still tied to these scans. We're still tied to these, we find out every 3 or 6 months whether a medication is working or how we're doing. And so going through that experience of knowing, hey, this scan is really important and it could really change things. I think that lived experience piece is different as you go on. So Kristen, can I call on you first, if you can
Sure.
harken back to that time 5 years ago when you were diagnosed, and what's different for you?
Everything is different for me. It lays sort of blanket, I'll use the term blanket. It'll get lays kind of a layer over everything else that happens, over your relationships, over your self-care, over how you want to make meaning and purpose in your life, how you want to connect and relate and help other people. Definitely how much I spend time with my family. And being a writer and a certified coach, I thought, well, let me use those skills in the service of other women who might be going through what I've gone through. And so that's how I've kind of leveraged almost the experience for some good.
Would you say that being able to do that has provided you a sense of purpose?
100%. Absolutely.
And how important is that? How important is it in your life to have a purpose or have a reason to keep going in the morning?
It's crucial. You know, I think without a sense of meaning and purpose, you're just kind of wandering aimlessly through life. And I have a whole bunch of coaching tools that I live by. And one of them asks me every single day what I'm going to do that has to do with meaning and purpose, which is really finding something that's bigger than yourself or other people who are walking a path that you've walked before. And not necessarily having to do anything major every day, like starting something like SBC, which Laura did, but being able to make a difference because I am still alive.
Yes, beating those odds, right? I don't know that I really agree with the whole label of being a unicorn, but you know, having a different experience than some other people, being able to live a little bit longer with such a serious disease. So
yeah,
thank you.
Sure thing.
And anything else, Kristen, that comes to mind when you think about, you know, maybe even think in terms of like, what would you say to somebody who was newly diagnosed from your vantage point of 5 years out?
I would say don't lose hope, because there's research happening all the time. I'm on a drug that didn't exist for my treatment anyway when I was diagnosed. So all I'm trying to do is stay one step behind the scientific developments.
Absolutely. And that's why an organization like SBC is so important, because we focus on information. And you'll be happy to learn that we have developed some partnerships with some scientists, and we'll be offering information about different trials actually on the website. So if you're interested in a trial, you can search the website, and there's actually some links there that would give you some information about particular trials. Because finding a trial, if you want to participate in a trial, can be difficult if you're not treated at a large research facility.
I am, thank goodness. I'm at the University of Colorado Hospital out here, and they are plugged in.
Which is wonderful. Yes.
Yeah.
Some of the
for others,
that came out. Yeah, some of the statistics that came out recently was that it's about 80% of us that are treated in what they call a community setting, meaning not at a big research facility. And so for those of us who are in a place where maybe our doctors are not doing so much of the research, you know, doing some of the searching ourselves for trials that might be available that then you would take to discuss with your doctor if you qualify for the trial can be a really great way forward. Because a clinical trial, as Katie knows, is not something you do as a last resort. A lot of times, once you've been on 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 lines of treatment, you're actually no longer eligible for some trials. And so it's important to have some of that information up front. So Katie, same question over to you, but if you could talk about the whole, why did you participate in a clinical trial as well, especially early on in your treatment, if you would be able to talk about that, that'd be great, as well as just kind of looking back, what's different now for you?
Sure. Yes, I think when I think about what's different now for me, of course, I shouldn't say of course, but I remember, being very overwhelmed. And even those first few years, feeling like I couldn't plan much beyond my next scan, right? I have to live now because the next scan might radically change my life again. And when you look at statistics, I couldn't see hitting 3 years, let alone imagining that I would make it to 5. But I remember I went to a conference for metastatic, for women with metastatic disease that was not terribly far from where I live. And at that conference, I met a woman who had been living with the disease for 7 or 8 years, and then started getting connected with others who had been living with MBC for a long time. And that, I think, gave me a lot of hope that yeah, as you said, we're not statistics, and there is, you know, life with MBC. What I think has really been different for me now is that having MBC has helped me really take stock of what's really important for me, and it helped me to give me perspective to live with intentionality and really be intentional about how I'm going to use whatever time I might have left. And so, but to answer then the question about the clinical trials, when I was diagnosed, I am being treated at a major academic center, and my oncologist said, "Hey, I have this potential trial for you." You know, it's first line explained what it was. And it was actually looking at adding Ibrance in the first line setting to Herceptin, Perjeta, and Letrozole for triple positive disease. And so I took it, did some research on Ibrance and its effectiveness in the ER positive stage, and decided that it was something that I was definitely interested in, because I work in higher ed. You know, research is something that I value and understand, and so I wanted to be able to participate. It was an open study, so I knew which arm of the trial I had been randomized to, and I was randomized to the standard of care arm. So I actually never got to have the Ibrance, but it was a really great experience. And I am continuing to just evaluate at every progression. Is there a trial that makes sense? Is there something out there that I want to try to look into, whether it would be at my center or someplace else?
Was it a concern for you when your doctor presented the possibility of a trial that you might get what are known as placebos, meaning not get any medication at all?
They made it very clear to me that the only difference, right, was you get the Ibrance or you don't. And if you don't get the Ibrance, you're getting exactly the same treatment as you would if you weren't in the trial. So that was really reassuring and helped me, you know, to want to be a part of the trial. And then I thought, you know, if by chance I happen to get the additional drug, that might, again, I was still in the very overwhelmed stage of the disease shortly after diagnosis. And so I thought, well, shoot, the more opportunities I have to do that, the better. One of the things that I've learned since that time, right, is that trials also give us opportunity to access drugs that aren't readily available to the rest of the population. And you can only get access to some of these newest things if you're able and willing to participate in the trial. So that's, I think, for me, another incentive to continue looking at trials that might make sense and would be feasible for me to participate in when it makes, you know, when they're available.
And now with your taking Verzenio along with Herceptin and Perjeta, you talked about that being off-label use. Has that been something that's been difficult to get approved by your insurance company?
Yes. So yes. It is not FDA approved right now. There was a phase 2 trial that they did that showed some really positive results. And that was why an oncologist recommended that perhaps I try it. But my insurance company has denied it and denied an appeal and denied a second appeal. So fortunately, I was really lucky that the pharmaceutical company, Lilly, has a program that they accepted me into, and they're going to be providing the medication for me because my insurance company has said that because it's experimental, they are not willing to pay for it at this time.
So one thing that a lot of people don't know is that even if a drug is approved by the FDA, for one thing, a lot of times oncologists will, because they know how the drug works, they know how people may respond to it, that they will use it as an off-label, meaning not exactly what the FDA approves that medication for. But the thing then that becomes an issue is that insurance companies don't have to pay for something if it's not FDA approved or indicated for a particular subtype. And every insurance company is different, as you found, Katie, as you were going through that process. But it's so important to remind everybody that each of the pharmaceutical companies does have a foundation associated with them, and they will often do things like cover, that's where copay assistance oftentimes comes to us. So those of us with private insurance, we can get assistance with copays. They will pay for sometimes access to medications when it might be an off-label use. And then if you are on Medicare or Medicaid and aren't eligible for the copay assistance programs, they will also assist with covering some of those costs as well. So always important to remember that even if the insurance company says no, that's not the end of the discussion. But Katie, you've spent an awful lot of time trying to get that approved. That took up a lot of energy and effort, didn't it?
Yes, over a couple of weeks. And I actually still have one more level of appeal that we're going to try with the insurance company. But in the meantime, I'm going to take advantage of the pharmaceutical company's foundation to get started on the drug.
And the great thing about participating in something where it's off-label use is that the pharmaceutical company is also gathering information by you doing that. And that is part of their incentive, right, to cover it, is that they're getting data. They're getting real world data on, is this medication going to work in this particular setting? So thank you, Katie, for sharing that. Is there anything else that comes to mind that you might say to yourself as newly diagnosed or somebody else who's newly diagnosed?
Oh, I think that something that's been really valuable for me in the whole experience has been seeking out and finding other women in the community and intentionally, and I didn't, I was very frustrated at the beginning because locally where I live, there aren't a lot of networking opportunities or support groups, but there are many, many opportunities through the internet and online. And so, Surviving Breast Cancer is just one of the organizations that really wants to support women with SBC in ways that you can get connected to women who get it in ways that others, even with early stage, don't understand in the same way.
Thank you for that, Katie. I know you mentioned meeting somebody early on that had been living with the disease for 6 or 7 years, and how amazing is it to see, oh, that could be my future, not necessarily the numbers that my doctor is throwing at me in those initial appointments. So thank you very much, Katie, for sharing. All right, Amy, last but not least, certainly, what is different now versus when you were diagnosed, and anything else you'd like to share?
I would think like words that people focus on when you're newly diagnosed, like survivor, cancer-free, ringing the bell, because many people that are diagnosed like de novo don't get to ring the bell. I think it also helps me. I do medical imaging and I now manage, but still sometimes scan. I think for me, I can sympathize with somebody that's there, like a caregiver with a loved one, and they're wanting them to keep getting tested and keep trying new drugs. Like there's a different level of understanding because you want to live and you want to try. But for me, being diagnosed metastatic, I feel like you have to advocate for yourself. That's the first thing that I think women forget to do, is the self-advocacy part. But the other thing is, I think you have to share at your own level of comfort. Like I might be okay with sharing with the community, whereas other women that I know that might share within the community, they don't necessarily want to share outside where they work or whatever, because it does change the narrative at work. Like there are many of us that are still working, and I don't think people realize that because often women don't share they're working and living metastatic. There's a fear of losing their job or being told they can't do it. We see that daily. So I think that's important to just remember to live one day at a time. And if the day's too big, take it by the hour. And if the hour is too big, take it by the minute. I think the biggest thing that I could share is I want to honor the women that came before me to bring awareness to metastatic, like Silke and others that did things behind the scenes and out front. So I want to be able to carry the initiative into the future and make other women not have to feel alone. I think even though I knew I was going to be metastatic, because I knew what the images showed. And even though I think I was metastatic, you're still not prepared, even though you know you're not ready. And many of us know that we'll have progression, but like, are you ever really ready for that news? I don't think you are.
And what is it like for you being on your first line of treatment for as long as you have, which is amazing. 4 years is amazing. What is it like for you as you're watching other people go through progressions, or as you see maybe what's coming?
There's a fear. There's a fear that like this is going to happen to me. Like, you know what I mean? It happens to everybody. Like you don't hear people living 25 years on the first line. I'm not saying there are those out there, but they are truly unicorns. Many women have gone from their first line to the second line. There's a fear, and sometimes you feel a little guilty when you're sharing in a group and somebody's sharing, hey, I'm on my 6th line of treatment and I'm still having progression. Your heart hurts for that person because you know what they're going through for the scan. Because I feel like we all have the same level of anxiety with the scans, because you're worried about getting the scan. What's the scan going to show? And if it shows something, what's the next plan? If it's not, then okay, then I'm good for a few months. But then you worry about every ache and pain. Oh, did that scan not show something? But is something there? We all live in that same mindset, I think. And I think some of us stay busy so we don't have time to think about that, and we keep ourselves occupied. Like I don't have children, so I work a lot, but I can't imagine like how women could work like that and care for children, because you know, as we've talked about having the spoons every day and the self-care, like you're tired, you got to know your limits for the day. And you know, my motto is say no so you say yes to yourself. So that's for sure.
Yes. And so if you are talking to somebody who cannot get their insurance company to cover a PET scan, and so they're having to get bone scans and CT scans, and they're freaking out that that's not sufficient or that's not the gold standard, as somebody who understands how these scans work, what would you say to that person? Because we hear this a lot. A lot of insurance companies don't like to cover PET scans.
So some of it people don't understand is for like breast cancer, the isotope for the PET scan doesn't necessarily match your subtype. They're just now coming out with isotopes for the ER/PR positive. But I try to tell women when they get so worked up over the PET scan, a PET scan is only from the eyes to the thighs. And when you get a bone scan, your entire body is getting scanned from the top of your skull to your toes. So if you've had bone mets, they're seeing all of your bones, not just a part of them. But generally, if you get a bone scan, they also do like a chest, abdomen, and pelvis CT. And so they get it. And if something is found, then that will cause for a referral for you to get the PET scan. So I think women have to be understanding, like definitely advocate. And if you think that that's there, but there are different preferences, and people think just PET scans are just the gold standard for everything. But I would tell women they need to do the research and see if what they're getting is for what their cancer type is, for sure.
And for those of you who you know, we're hearing talking about that isotope, Cerianna is the name of the new. Is it a scan or an isotope? I don't know what Cerianna.
It's an isotope, and it's the same. That's the isotope that'll, like FDG is the normal isotope for a PET scan, but there's other isotopes. But normally you're injected with FDG, and that binds itself to the sugars and stuff. And they scan you, but women have to realize, like if you've had bone mets, they might be doing a bone scan, like I said, so they get your lower legs, your feet, the top of your skull. So there's just giving them baselines, so not to be frustrated with it. And then people are living longer. So used to when people got PET scans, they only had like 2 or 3, you know, like people that got the PET scans, they only had 2 or 3 of them. But women are living, even other cancer patients, they're living for years and years and years. And so I think that's part of the issue too with some of the approvals.
Yes. And if you think about those isotopes that are being injected into your body, and if they build up, and I mean, they don't even know because they don't have longitudinal studies for if you've had 20 or 25 of them, what that looks like. I still stay away from my kids the night of when I get a PET scan. Not that we know if it might actually affect them, but just that there's a possibility that, you know, shedding all those radioactive molecules might theoretically affect their growing brains. There's just so much that they don't know. So thank you for that, Amy, and definitely be looking for Amy's videos. She has a great way of breaking down some of these things to the point of what are you really worried about and how can you mitigate or address the things that keep you up at night. I know that there's also a little bit of a debate. Some doctors really like to have people keep doing mammograms. So doing PET scans and mammograms, and then other doctors don't. And so I know that worries a lot of people. Like, am I going to get, or am I getting a test that's actually going to show when something needs to be addressed, right? So, you know, your peace of mind and being able to go from, you know, quarter to quarter, it is so important. And speaking up and letting doctors know. There have been times where doctors have wanted to, when I was stable, extend out the time of my scans, and I just said no. I mean, from a mental health perspective, I can't deal with that. So important to remember that those are things that you can speak up about. So thank you all for sharing from your personal experiences and just you know, how you've wanted to give back. I think it's just so important. What we were talking about with Kristen, the idea of having purpose and the idea of having meaning. And I think that is very, very different for everybody. And thank you for the reminder. I totally forgot Dawn. Dawn, I'm so sorry.
I was about to say, I was like too busy. I was trying to multitask and comment because we're live streaming on social. And so I was like, wait, did we get to everybody?
So sorry.
I was just going to
It's
put it away.
right? My apologies, Dawn. So
you're not off the hook. You're not off the hook.
Same question I asked everybody else. What is different for you, and what would you say to your newly diagnosed self?
Well, mine was a little different because I just straight up asked my doctor, am I going to die? And she told me no, I can live 10 to 20 years. I'm HER2 negative. So I, you know, keep that in the back of my mind, and my first line of defense only worked for a year and a half. So that's when you start thinking, you know, what's next, you know, but I just kept in my mind, she said, when that medicine stops working, then we just try another medicine. When that stops working, we'll just try another one. And with all the clinical trials and all the technology, she was like, you can live longer. So I keep that in my mind. So I tell people that, yeah, don't give up hope. Just if something doesn't work, just try a different medicine, and try not to have scan anxiety either, because that just causes more stress, and we don't need the stress. So I learned not to have scan anxiety. I wait till the doctor tells me what is actually wrong. Wait for it to come out of his mouth to let me know what is wrong or what is right or what do we need to do next. So I just tell people, like, one day at a time is my motto, and living open to whatever they're going to throw at me. I'm ready.
And what line of treatment are you on now?
I'm on my fifth line.
So you've gone through the whole getting bad news again and again and again. What is that like, and how do you deal with that?
Like I said, one day at a time. And she told me when that medicine don't work, we try a new one, and that's what we did. We try a new one. And actually, I'm on my third doctor because I've been moving around. I don't let metastatic breast cancer get to me. I even moved to Alaska for a year just to explore Alaska. So I got a new doctor up there. So he gave me his cell number, which was nice. So when I did move back to Texas, the oncologist here told me his treatment. I text him, And he said, yep, I agree with that treatment. So that was helpful to have a second opinion. So
somebody that knows you and has worked with you, that's invaluable to have that perspective as well. Wonderful. Thank you. And please, I'm so sorry that I almost skipped over you.
It's okay.
So we've got about 10 minutes left in our time this evening. And I wanted to use that. Oh, Amy, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, Abigail, can you share your story? Because your story's a little different and you've had different levels of treatment too since you lived. Can you share yours?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm also on my 5th line of treatment. And I had a little bit of a weird diagnosis in that they thought I was stage 2 for a couple of months. And then in the middle of chemo, we found out that I was actually stage 4. And so, one thing that I always remind people is if there is something in your mind that you think your doctor should do, don't back down. And I don't anymore, because in that initial conversation, I said, should we get a PET scan or some scan to look at my whole body? And my doctor was like, nah, you could, but it's not really necessary. Here are the statistics, here are the odds, et cetera, et cetera. And we almost didn't even do chemo. And it was during chemo that we found out that I was stage 4, and I had a significant disease load. When I say my bones were black, they were black with mets, because on the x-rays, metastases show up as black. So if I had listened to my gut early on, or understood that I should listen to my gut, things might have been different. And I no longer allow those things to pass by. We are not statistics. I've been on the wrong side of statistics too many times to not want the doctors to look at everything. I've also done some off-label use of medications. I did a combination of medication, three of them at the same time. I did Piqray, Kisqali, and Faslodex, which is not something that the FDA has approved. So I had those experiences like Katie did with fighting with my insurance company and getting them to do something that was a little bit out of pattern. But like Kristen said, as we live longer with this, we see that things change. I've been on medications like Piqray only a few months after they were approved by the FDA. And so have really seen over the 5.5 years that staying up on the research and understanding those new developments can be really helpful. But I'm also on Xeloda now, which has been around for 50 years or something, right? So it doesn't mean that the new shiny thing is going to be the best thing. Sometimes it's a medication that's a little more tried and true. And it also took 5 years for me to get to the point of the Mets being under control completely. So I had a lot of stability for a lot of years on oral medications, but it wasn't until I did Taxotere and Xeloda in early 2022 that I finally got to the point of no evidence of active disease, which I know a lot of people, like, they want to get to no evidence of disease, or for those of us with bone mets, no evidence of active disease. But I'm always reminded of Sandra Spivey, who lived 23 years with MBC and never was NED or NEAD. She always had active metastasis in 23 years. So there are those things that seem like really important goals, like no evidence of disease, that I've seen over time that we're all just so different, and we all react differently to medications. I have a germline mutation, so ATM, similar to BRCA. And so, that changes things too, because my actual DNA is working against me, and all of these things. So ATM is the part of your DNA that repairs. So we're always experiencing problems with our DNA, deletions, right? Our DNA is being affected by the sun, by everything. And if the part of your DNA that's supposed to repair your DNA is not working, then obviously that's not a good thing. So learned a lot. But I think that whole point of speaking up and listening to your gut, that's probably what I would tell my newly diagnosed self. Stick to your guns. If something seems really important to you and the doctor is like, maybe, say yes, do it. That's really important. And then something similar to what Katie said, which is find other people who are experiencing the same thing and are farther along, right? Who've been living longer than you with the particular diagnosis, your particular subtype, or, you know, specifics as to your situation, because I've learned more about managing side effects and even the psychosocial managing my response to this experience. I've learned more from other people in the community than I ever have from a healthcare worker. And I'm not saying that to be negative about healthcare workers. It's just that they don't have the lived experience. And the lived experience is on a whole other level. So thank you, Amy, for reminding me to share. Sometimes I forget.
Yeah, Abigail, I just wanted to say too, and add, for if you're joining and you're newly diagnosed, don't get overwhelmed with all the terms. Reach out to people in the community and let them help you decipher, because it's like an encrypted code. You need something in the beginning. So don't feel overwhelmed. There are people out there that can help you navigate, for sure.
It is a whole other language, isn't it? Yes, we're having to learn a whole other language. So that is one thing too, that if anytime we're doing these webinars and we're using acronyms, please stop us.
Yes, put them in the chat.
We get
Raise
used to
your hand.
them. We get used to all the acronyms. We get used to all the terms, and then forget that not everybody is familiar with them. So thank you, Amy, for that reminder.
Yeah, maybe that could be something that we work towards in 2023,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Like putting together that like vocabulary list. So yeah.
Yes, 100%. So looking forward to our February for this webinar series. We are super excited to, so we'll have 2, and they will be on Wednesdays at 7, so this time. And the first will be on February 8th, and we will be hearing from the amazing people at 2 Unstoppable, which is an organization in the Northeast that provides exercise programs for people with breast cancer, and then specifically for people with MBC. So it's an online virtual group. It lasts for 6 weeks. It's wonderful. I completed it in 2022 and am one of the ambassadors for the current class. So they're going to come talk about how there's lots of research on how exercise, not just for early stage breast cancer, but also for people who are dealing with MBC, whether we're talking about our bone health or side effects, etc. There's all kinds of research about how exercise can help with that. And then the way that they do exercise in a social setting is also proven to helps you stick to it, right? Because it's so hard to stick to a new exercise program. And then on the 22nd, which is 2 weeks from the 8th, Stephanie Walker and Christine Hodgkins will come to reprise their presentation from San Antonio on the topic of not just living with MBC, but also all of the organizations that support people living with MBC. And it was an amazing presentation at San Antonio. They've got wonderful slides. I learned about organizations that I had not heard of when we were there. So I'm really excited to have them come and share the same information that they shared with all of the doctors in San Antonio. And we will be continuing the webinar series. And so if you have a topic that you would like us to tackle, please let us know. We will be probably organizing quite a bit around the themes that Kristen has laid out for us, which really, I think, are under the heading of just living with MBC or the surviving survivorship idea, because that's what we're doing. That's what we're all doing. We're all trying to figure out how this living with this beast, or sometimes I think about it at the sword of Damocles, right? It's always hanging over our heads, whether we're remembering or paying attention to it or not. How do you do that? And I think that we'll be able to recruit people either from this committee or from the community at large to talk about that lived experience and give people ideas. One of the things that came up in San Antonio as well is that there seems to be a fair amount of people in the MBC community who want to be advocates. And I know that Amy and I have had this conversation for quite a bit. Finding your spot, finding your niche, finding where you want to be an advocate is something that we all have to figure out. And so that's going to be one of the things that we'll be talking about too, as we host the webinars and talk about different things is also talking about how can you as an individual person with individual strengths and weaknesses and background and experience and all of that, how do you give back in your unique way? So we'll be offering ideas and suggestions of different places where you can volunteer as we conduct these webinars into 2023. So I'm super excited about that. I think it'll be really fun. But please let us know, because we want to be very responsive to the community and what you want to be hearing, and bring the people that you want to hear from. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Laura, for any last thoughts.
Oh, well, thank you. You just reminded me. I feel so old and dated, but I just made like one of my first TikToks the other day. And you know how you can do that like double screen of like, you're an advocate, right? And I'm like, yeah. And there's like, did you go to school for this? I'm like, no. Did you get a certificate in this? I'm like, no. Wait, but you're an advocate? And I'm like, yeah. So like, I'm so excited for that conversation, because it's so true that how we have to like find our voice and what our calling is, and it can take on so many different shapes and forms. I think it's going to be a really wonderful conversation. So I'm super excited about all of this. I appreciate all of you for joining us tonight, sharing your stories. I mean, this MBC leadership team that we're cultivating, literally, I don't think I stopped smiling for the last hour. My cheeks kind of hurt, but just inspiration and hope, I think, is the message. And I think I'm just really excited. I hope everyone who's watching or listening or viewing this later at a later date is feeling inspired. And feel free to reach out. You can reach out to info@survivingbreastcancer.org, which is just our general inbox. Please feel free to reach out to either myself or Abigail or Kristen, who's also on the call at the moment. It's just our first names at survivingbreastcancer.org. We should probably think about getting an MBC generic, shared inbox. But, this is all part of the beautiful growth, right? And so we're formalizing processes and programming, and we couldn't do it without you. So I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, we hope you'll join us for our other webinars. And remember, too, there's the podcast. We also have a YouTube channel. So all of the information is presented in as many different modalities as possible so that you can get the information and the education that you need. So hope to see you again.
Thank you. Bye.